Hello and welcome, everybody. We are excited to chat with you guys today. This is Coach Carly and the squad. We are coming today talking about animal protein versus plant-based protein, which has been a hot topic, to say the least, in the last number of years, and not necessarily in a debate style, but we want to talk about the differences between animal protein and plant-based protein, how they can affect our progress, our health, and longevity, and like what the actual difference is between those, because we have a wide client base. We do have a lot of plant-based clients, vegetarian clients, and people who favor eating animal protein. So I definitely think it's worth chatting a little bit more about it and shedding some light, and just kind of going back and forth on what our own opinions are. So to start off, I think we can all share what our own preference is in terms of animal protein versus plant-based protein. I'll throw it to Zach. Are you team animal protein or are you team plant-based?
I would definitely say animal protein. I mean, I just love meat in general. It's tasty. It sits well with my digestion, so I'm definitely biased to the animal based over plant based.
For sure. Clara, what's your preference?
My personal preference is definitely team animal-based protein. However, I'm not completely against being more plant-based. I do just think that there are definitely a lot of like different nuances, different things that need to be considered, which we're going to break down for everyone.
Greg.
I'm team animal protein. And like what Clara said, it's not that I'm against plant-based protein. I think the biggest reason is just like practicality. Like I think it's just easier to implement into a high protein diet. And like what Zach said, just tasty. I love meat too.
Yeah.
Casey.
I'm definitely team animal based, but that's kind of for myself more personally. I do think there are, a few benefits to kind of blending the two. I think Carly, you're kind of on that same side of things too.
Yeah, I definitely am. And I think with all of us having a strong history in bodybuilding, it should come as no surprise to anyone that we all have a personal preference for animal protein. But I'm definitely on the side with like Claire and Casey, where I like a blend of the both. I definitely lean closer to eating more of a ratio of animal protein, but a large portion of my, not a large portion, but a decent portion of my daily protein intake does come from plant-based options. And we'll dive into a little bit about what the benefits and pros and cons of both of these protein sources as we go through this chat today. So what we want to talk about is the indications of animal protein versus plant-based protein when it comes to performance and muscle growth, what the metabolic indications can be, and then how they come into play in terms of health and longevity. So let's talk a little bit about muscle growth and performance, guys. So let's talk about like what protein is. Does someone want to jump in and explain what protein is?
Yeah, I mean, protein is just a bunch of amino acids. You have all your 9 essential amino acids that complete a protein. And usually meat is an animal-based protein, have all of these 9 essential amino acids, where plant-based proteins are usually a little bit incomplete. They lack certain essential amino acids. So you have to be a little bit more strategic in planning, because you have to combine different types of plant-based proteins to get overall that really complete protein profile. Like, animal-based protein has a lot more leucine in it, for example, which is really key for muscle building, where plant-based stuff usually has a lot lower amounts of leucine. So you have to really work hard to bring that level up. You need to eat a lot more plant-based protein to kind of get those same levels that you would get from a smaller portion of meat. And so, that's a protein. A protein is just built up of 9 essential amino acids, and those amino acids together make a complete protein, and that is what we utilize for building muscle, recovering, etc.
When it comes to our client base in terms of getting in protein, do you guys find that it's easier for clients who prioritize animal-based protein? Who has an easier time hitting their protein target? I think we all have the same answer here, but let's talk about that a little bit.
I definitely think that like people who eat more animal-based protein do have an easier time hitting their protein goal. And like the fitness industry and the health industry, like we love to focus on extremes. And so when we're talking about animal-based, it's not like we're talking about eating carnivore, where literally all you eat is animal-based protein sources. So I think that it's really important to recognize that. For my For myself personally, like I only eat in 2 meals. 2 meals a day contain meat. The rest of my meals, like I will have eggs or I will have yogurt or something like that, which is not like a vegan protein source, but sometimes people are like think of animal based as just being that's literally all you're eating is like a bunch of meat. And
Yeah.
of course, like we have seen some negative outcomes of like a more carnivore based diet.
Mhm.
But in terms of our clients, like I'm pretty sure that you guys can all relate. If we get a client who doesn't have a humongous background or understanding of nutrition come to us and they are eating primarily plant-based, like 99% of them are not eating enough protein. And it's simply because they're lacking the knowledge and the understanding of what plant-based sources actually contain protein and also how to combine different plant-based protein sources to create a more whole balanced meal. So I think that that's really important and that's kind of my biggest like beef that I have with plant-based protein sources is that a lot of them are incomplete and you are going to have a really hard time hitting your protein intake if you aren't very just mindful and aware and planned and prepared when it comes to how your meals are kind of created throughout the day.
And I feel like you need to eat like a surprising amount of, if you're going to have mostly plant-based protein, you need to eat a lot. And it's not just coming with protein, right? All those vegetables that you're eating and stuff, they come with carbs as well. And so overall, it can really shoot your calories up, and it's hard to kind of create that balance, especially if you're trying to create a deficit by doing a plant-based only kind of protein, because it's you just need to eat so much. There's so much volume there compared to, say, a meat that just makes it more difficult on a day-to-day basis. And depending on who you are, sometimes your gut might not, like all those vegetables, and like it can be hard on the gut sometimes as well, depending on who you are.
Yeah. And to
Yeah.
further on that too, I think that like Clara was talking about, when we do have, because for our average client who comes to us, doesn't have a ton of knowledge about nutrition, but maybe has a preference for plant-based, whether that's like dietary preferences, whether that's like a doctor or naturopath has told them to do so, like whatever it is, they tend to struggle to acclimate to being really organized because you have to be so intentional and so organized. You're throwing way more different ingredients into your meals. So it's not that it's a bad thing. It's just you have to put a lot more effort into eating plant-based in order to actually hit your protein target. I think you guys can agree, even when we are, because we do have clients that work with all of us that are plant-based. And when I am creating a meal plan for a client who is plant-based, there's so much more that goes into it in order for them to like be able to actually hit that target. There's less alternatives for each meal option that I'm creating them. And then you almost at times will get like pushback from them because they feel restricted. And it's like, if you just maybe opened up your world a little bit to eating animal based, it would make things easier. So I think like for convenience based as well, for a lot of people it's helpful. And there's another piece that we didn't touch on too, and that's the actual nutrient and like bioavailability of the vitamins and minerals that are in plant-based versus animal-based protein. And that's the other thing that a lot of clients will miss out on if they aren't eating at least a little bit of animal-based protein, is like that iron, that B12. You can't get that as bioavailable in plant-based options.
Even like creatine, like in red meats too. There's a lot of creatine in red meats that obviously we all know is helpful. So yeah, it's definitely tough when it comes to doing the plant-based, but I think overall it's not worse. I think if protein is equated and like the quality of the protein is equated, both are extremely effective for building muscle.
I agree. When we're talking about creating a complete protein too for clients, if people don't know what that means, like what's your go-to combo if you're, trying to create a complete protein for a client? We know that for plant-based, like soy-based, is a complete protein, but we've talked about how plant-based protein is typically missing all of the essential amino acids to make it a complete protein. And that's what your body needs in order to grow muscle. And that's what we're talking about. So one way that you can do that is by pairing like beans, legumes with a starch like rice. So like rice and beans is a complete protein because that adds in that amino acid that makes it a complete protein. That's usually my go-to. I'm trying to think of another one for people.
All of those ones are definitely really helpful for getting more of that complete kind of protein profile.
I definitely agree. And I do find also that clients that eat plant-based will also sometimes turn to processed plant-based sources, which like I know the Gardein brand doesn't have a horrible caloric makeup, but it also doesn't have a lot of nutrients in it. And so out of convenience, they turn to these like plant-based alternatives to replace that protein, but they're not actually getting like the nutrient out of that alternative. They would be getting way more nutrients if they just opted to eat a whole food animal protein instead, which can be a hard pill to swallow sometimes. So I think all of us can agree that for muscle growth, it's easier, more efficient, especially for the beginner, to be eating animal protein. But again, when you are eating whole foods, and I know for me specifically as well, like I try to eat a really high fiber diet. So there is a portion when you do eat high fiber, like things like whole grain products, will typically pack a little bit more protein. Like if you're eating brown rice, quinoa, all of those types of things have protein in them. So when you are filling your day with that in order to hit a fiber target, you do end up eating, sometimes your day is filled with like 20 to 30, maybe even 40 grams of protein that comes just from those plant-based options. And just like Zach said, you're not missing, I think I said this before we even started the chat, just because maybe 30 to 40% of your protein target is coming from a plant-based protein source, it doesn't mean that you're losing out on 30 to 40% of the muscle growth that you could be seeing. Like the quality of the protein is still there. It's more so that you are hitting your protein target that matters the most, and that your training is also like complementing that.
Yeah, like when we track our macros, right? We're accounting for all the macros and everything that we eat. So if I have a ton of rice in a day, like that's obviously going to come with protein. So I'd probably get, like you said, like 40-ish plus grams of protein from plant-based sources in a day. It's not that complicated. You just hit your protein target, and ideally, if you can, if it makes sense for you, throw some meat in there because you're going to get more complete all-rounded proteins, and it's just easier to hit on a daily basis, easier to plan for, and it just seems much more viable for like long-term sustainability.
That's why we're here to like educate you on why animal-based protein is a little bit more viable and sustainable with plant-based or vegans. Like if I get a client who eats meat, then it's like, okay, perfect, awesome. Like I don't have to, go into the whole spiel about like why you need to probably take, EAAs or BCAAs. Like vegans and plant-based people will be lacking in those. So, I don't always recommend supplements, but plant-based folks and vegans, you're probably one of the people that would be a good candidate for taking those supplements, or again, the vitamins that we talked about, zinc, omega-3s, like all those things. And again, like I'll recommend any plant-based client, like, hey, you could probably benefit from these more than someone who is eating meat. And again, it's just more so like the extra step that needs to go into trying to optimize your health as a plant-based person.
Yeah, I think we always like try to only recommend supplements that are going to fill the gaps in a person's nutrition, right? The things that they are missing. And so if we do have a more plant-based kind of client, they're going to have certain gaps, and that's just normal. It's just a part of it. And so yeah, recommending something like and supplementing with maybe a creatine or EAAs can be extremely beneficial for those just doing solely plant-based protein. I think it's going to make you feel better. I think it's going to help your overall health. I think it's going to help build more muscle, etc. And overall, it should just be a nice complement to your kind of plant-based eating. Whereas if you're eating mostly animal-based, maybe you need to, have more micronutrients in your diet. If you're only doing more animal-based protein, maybe you need more, maybe a green supplement, or you need to eat some more vegetables, because it's not just black and white. It's not just solely animal-based. It's solely plant-based. You want to ideally try to have a mix, whatever side you kind of lean to.
Definitely. And I think that leads us into kind of talking about like the health and metabolic outcomes. And we all have agreed throughout this entire chat about, a mix of both is definitely beneficial. And we've talked about already the like vitamins and minerals that come from eating, animal-based protein. But that also, like, we don't want to negate all of that comes from, because what you were just saying, when it comes to eating plant-based, there's actually a lot of vitamin and minerals that come from eating more leafy greens and more grains and, things like sweet potato and all that type of stuff, right? Like Clara said, there's always extremes on either side. Do you guys have anything that you notice with your clients when maybe they switch to wanting to like cut out animal protein Do you notice any like common themes with clients that either come to us eating fully plant-based or kind of switching to eating maybe less animal protein in terms of like seeing progress or how they perform? Have you guys noticed anything that trends there?
I think that eating more plant-based, because I understand if people are doing it for ethical reasons or something like that, obviously that is a choice.
Yeah.
I think kind of an issue more so lies when people think that it's like the trendy thing to do, or when they're just kind of misled when it comes to like more animal-based protein. But I definitely do think like it's a bit of a barrier if someone is choosing to eat plant-based and they're also trying to form healthy habits and routines and they're trying to be consistent with hitting the gym and getting their steps and getting their meal prep done and properly hydrating and getting enough sleep. Like it's just one more layer that you have to consider when it comes to your meal prep and planning. And that's not to say that it's impossible, because it's not. I would just say that it can make things a little bit more challenging for clients, and they can get a little bit of fatigue when it comes to trying to track and trying to like hit this protein goal. And it's not as if we're even setting a protein goal like really high. I would honestly say that when I'm working with a client who eats more plant-based, I actually set their protein goal a little bit lower than I actually would somebody who is eating animal-based, because and that it's like harder for them to hit it. And at the end of the day, like you don't need to be eating 200 grams of protein a day. Like the average person does not need to be, obviously depending on your size and stuff. And I believe it's around like 70 to 80 grams of protein a day is just for like your bodily, like body to be able to perform and like survive essentially on what it to do.
Mhm.
So it's not like you need to be stuffing yourself with protein. However, it is just a very common theme for plant-based people, even struggling to hit like 120, 130 grams of protein. And I would honestly argue that that much is required in order to build muscle mass.
Well,
Yeah.
it's tough too, because like most people who come to us are wanting to lose fat, and generally, ideally, you want to have a little bit of a higher protein intake when you're trying to cut. And it becomes hard when you are doing plant-based, because attaining that higher protein intake is hard because it also comes with a lot more carbs, and it's more calorie. I don't even want to say calorie dense, because like vegetables aren't calorie dense, but it does come like trying to hit that in the pursuit of trying to hit the protein target via plant-based. You also get a lot of carbs that come with that, and also a lot of fiber. So it can just be harder to hit those higher protein targets doing plant-based, especially when you're trying to cut. And I think that's the tough thing, is like trying to hit protein, but also trying to keep calories in a deficit.
Especially too, I sometimes notice a theme where plant-based clients are averse to using even like protein powders, even vegan protein powders. And it's so hard to actually hit that protein target. And like I've dabbled in eating more plant-based, and exactly like Clara said, like I wasn't eating, typically I eat between like 140 to 150 grams of protein a day, like for my body composition. So when I was favoring plant-based, I was eating more like 110. And without using a plant-based protein powder, it was so difficult. And then what ends up happening is you're filling your day. You know, I was eating a lot of like lentil pasta and things like that. And it took my body a bit to adjust. But like when I tell you that my digestion hated me doing that, and that wasn't just a me experience, I've had clients experience that too, where you end up eating almost like too much fiber, and it's just so much for your body to break down that it has a really hard time. But we also know there was like one little research piece that's come up quite a bit in the last couple of decades, and that favoring plant-based protein can be better for cardiovascular benefits. And like, you know, we deal with a lot of cardiovascular disease, you know, in North America, especially as we age. And I think that a lot of that can be because someone who is eating plant-based protein is choosing whole foods. Like you end up having to do that a little bit more. And the average person who eats animal-based doesn't necessarily like eat how we eat or eat, you know, how we eat on program. Like the average person who eats animal-based, like Clara said, that could mean, you know, protein from dairy and things like that. Like, you know, they're eating like eggs and bacon every morning and things like that, which we know if you're eating too much saturated fat, then like obviously it's going to have negative benefits down the line. But animal-based protein when done correctly, when you're eating lean protein, when you're eating, a balanced macronutrient profile, you still have the same level of cardiovascular benefits as you would from eating plant-based. That's what research is more telling us now, from my understanding.
Yeah, I think with the plant-based, it kind of goes beyond the muscle benefits, and like it does go into a lot. You get a lot of heart and like gut health benefits, assuming that your gut can deal with a lot of plant-based food in one day, in which a lot of us maybe not. But yeah, it's not just black and white, right? There's nothing it is a little bit more complex, but I think at the end of the day, having just a mix of both is really ideal. Because you need the fiber, but we also need like those complete proteins. So if you're willing, if there's not ethical reasons holding you back, it might be wise to have a blend of the both.
Yeah, I don't think any of us here are really saying like go full on like animal protein only. Like we all incorporate both.
Yeah.
Again, I think for myself personally, I probably have like 3 meals that has like meat in it, but like in those meals I'll have like tortillas or rice or potatoes or whatever, and those things have protein in them, and that's how everybody should, theoretically should be eating is a mix of everything. Like I think Clara pointed out, like social media, everyone will be on social media and you'll see the extremes. You'll see vegan and you'll see carnivore, and I think that's where you always see the pushback and the controversy, but it's like really like why are we all out here when we should all really just be in the middle here and have a good mix of both and benefit from both because they both have benefits.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think, go ahead, Casey.
I'm gonna say I work with actually quite a few like strictly plant-based vegans in my time, and I would say one out of maybe the 50 or 100 I've had in the last couple of years has like successfully hit their protein targets every single day, has successfully like hit their macros every single day, not going over their fats, not going over their carbs. And that's like 1 in 50. And there's so many moving parts when you are on your health and fitness journey, right? I really just feel like it's one more thing. And if you're looking for, like you were talking about, different like frozen options, different kind of protein sources, they just don't really have a really good macro profile. They'll tend to be higher in calories, tend to be higher in fats as well, and it can make it feel hard when it doesn't need to be that complicated, right?
I agree wholeheartedly.
There's a couple of clients that have been in our community that are like vegan or vegetarian and do eat plant-based. And if they get it, like if they put the effort in, like some of the meals they create,
Oh my God.
I'm like, that looks so good. Like that is so balanced, like, the things that they create. But again, like that does take a good understanding of different plant-based protein sources and kind of what you can pull and put together to create like a balanced profile when it comes to a meal. So we're not saying that it's impossible. I do just think like when you're mastering the basics, it can make it a little bit more challenging, but if you do put the time and effort into it, it's something that you generally or genuinely really want to do, like you can make it happen too.
Absolutely.
I think the bottom line here is like animal protein is going to be a lot more efficient for helping you hit your protein targets for building muscle. It's just easy. It's less things to think about, less planning. Plant protein is great for muscle growth as well, but you have to plan a lot more. You probably need to consume a lot more food, and you need to, make sure you're getting a blend of different kinds of these plant-based protein, these vegetables and things to get the complete protein in your diet. And so, if you are going to go plant-based, great. Just make sure you are supplementing with certain things like B12, maybe creatine, certain things to help kind of fill those gaps in your nutrition. And vice versa. If you're going more animal based, then make sure you just include some vegetables so you can get some good fiber and good micronutrients from your diet as well. And then I guess when choosing like an actual whey protein or a protein powder, both work. You can go for more of like a pea or soy protein when it comes to the plant based, or you can just do a nice whey or casein when you're doing the animal based. And either way, do what works best for you. Do what makes you feel good in your stomach, especially if you feel like you really want to go animal based, but when you eat meat, maybe you get an aversion to meat, or maybe you don't feel good in your gut, or vice versa with the plant based. Then act accordingly. Like it doesn't need to be just one thing. You can switch it up. You're not stuck to just one or the other. So do what works best for you, but hopefully this gives everyone a bit of a better idea on, plant versus animal-based proteins and kind of figuring out what's going to be best for you. And yeah, I hope it helped.